with cables to wireless radio waves. It changed how we communicate. From a back-breaking chore to zipping across the floor, it revolutionized house cleaning. And from watching the birds fly to doing it ourselves, made anything seem possible. They're all inventions of the 1900s, the decade that kicked off a century, and a techno-revolution in day-to-day life. From AM radio to air conditioning to the airplane, they're the inventions that shook the world. Whether it's somebody talking or somebody singing, you can hear their voices thousands of kilometers away, thanks to an invisible force called a radio wave and an inventor who turned that wave into a highway for sound. In the late 1800s, Reginald Fessenden is one of many scientists fascinated by a concept called spark gap transmission. He's hoping it's the ticket to a great leap forward in communication. If only these sparks could generate waves of energy strong enough to carry a human voice. The idea of sending any kind of message wirelessly is still revolutionary. The newly invented telephone needs cables to carry a signal. So does the telegraph when it sends out messages in Morse code. But demand is growing for communication that doesn't need wires, especially in the shipping industry.
The problem with maritime transportation in terms of communication is that once a vessel leaves the port, until it reaches its destination or at least approaches land at a very short range, it's unable to communicate.
Sending a voice across an ocean without wires would be a huge breakthrough. And even more amazing if it's a guy like Fessenden who didn't even finish high school. As a young man, he worked for Thomas Edison, laying cable under the streets of New York.
He worked in literally digging ditches, but because he was clearly one of the brighter people in that crew, he soon achieved a promotion and was eventually hired by Edison's own lab and very quickly was appointed Edison's chief chemist.
Fessenden proved to be naturally brilliant at everything, from chemistry to electrical engineering. That got him noticed by another big name, Westinghouse, where he worked with X-ray machines and other things that use electromagnetic radiation. Fessenden realizes this could also be the key to a breakthrough in wireless communication, an idea that becomes an obsession. A few decades earlier, scientists had figured out that electromagnetic radiation is all around us. It produces invisible waves of different lengths and frequencies, everything from X-rays and gamma rays to radio waves. Fessenden wants to use radio waves as a kind of highway to carry a voice signal, but in order to do that, he has to create radio waves artificially. Because the slow-moving voice signal needs a starting point where it can be linked up with a speedier radio wave. That's why Fessenden's using spark gap technology to create artificial radio waves.
It's two balls and a charge is built up between the two balls. So literally a spark will go from one electrode to another. That causes an electromagnetic wave to be emitted. It's invisible, but it can be very powerful.
Problem is, a radio wave produced by the spark method fades away quickly, so it's not able to carry understandable voice signals, and it makes a nasty noise.
Because essentially spark gaps create artificial static. That's exactly what they are. His reports from 1899 indicated that he heard very little except sparking.
As Fessenden ponders how to solve this problem, a European makes headlines. On December 12, 1901, an Italian called Marconi transmits a wireless signal in Morse code across the Atlantic. What surprises Fessenden is not that Marconi has pulled it off, but that he's bragging about it. If Marconi had sent a wireless voice across the Atlantic, now that would be news. For years, Fessenden has had an inkling that spark gap was not the answer. A walk to the pond gives him a new idea. The concept of a continuous, unbroken wave.
He understood that if he just kept throwing the rocks in, it would approximate waves that never stop.
Fessenden wonders, if you create one long, strong, continuous radio wave, will it be able to carry a sound, like the human voice, for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers?
A continuous wave is very simple. It contains a constant amplitude, that is, the distances between the tops and the bottoms of the peaks is exactly the same.
Fessenden thinks it might be possible to create a continuous radio wave with a machine called an alternator that turns mechanical energy into electrical energy. But he needs a machine hundreds of times more powerful than any alternator in existence.
And this was a formidable problem for engineers. He wrote probably the greatest electrical engineers in the world at General Electric, asking them if they could build such a device, and they told him they could not, but they would work on it.
By the summer of 1906, General Electric does deliver a high-powered alternator. But even this machine isn't powerful enough. So Fessenden spends months making his own adjustments to produce an even stronger electrical current. Now, he thinks he's ready to test his theory. He hooks the alternator up to a microphone at one end and the world's largest antenna at the other. Here's how it's supposed to work. When a person speaks into the microphone, it creates sound waves. The sound waves will hitch a ride on the much stronger, faster-moving radio waves created by the alternator. The alternator then sends this composite or modulated wave to the antenna, which transmits it to a receiver in some faraway place.
It's much like a hitchhiker getting onto a bus at the transmitter and then getting off the bus at the receiver.
On Christmas Eve of 1906, in Brant Rock, Massachusetts, it's time to put Fessenden's theory to the test. Hundreds of kilometers away on the Atlantic Ocean, ships suddenly receive a message in standard Morse code.
What have you got, lad? Be prepared for something of great interest to follow.
It's a heads up from Fessenden, who wants to make sure every sailor is paying attention to what happens next.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining.
It's an astonishing sound. For the first time ever, a voice is transmitted over great distance without cables and wires. Fessenden has successfully transported sound on a continuous radio wave. a concept called amplitude modulation, or AM radio.
Far earlier than any other wireless inventor, Fessenden understood how AM radio was going to work. It wasn't until the 1920s, however, that the broadcasting boom began to take off, but it spread like wildfire, faster than probably any other technology has ever spread, including the internet.
Fessenden doesn't get rich or become famous from his invention, but there is one sweet victory. His Italian competitor, Marconi, has to admit that Fessenden got it right and buys a license for his patent. Other big ideas of the 1900s? 1903, the electrocardiograph, or EKG, records the heart's electrical impulses and diagnoses without surgery. It transforms medicine and wins its inventor a Nobel Prize. 1901, fingerprinting, the signature that can't be forged and leaves the bad guys in a sweat. And 1908, cellophane, clearly indispensable in the kitchen.
The food for the entire meal was taken right out to the patio, well protected.
Coming up, a traveling salesman turns a risky ritual into a safe routine without losing his edge.